Good evening, I'm Enari Darklore and welcome to Churikua. Tonight, in our last compilation from our second season, you will listen to legends of Zacatecana's house, Maruoka's castle, 134 Zeedijk, and Cesco Pizzigani and the Levantine. And remember that the night awaits for you. My name doesn't matter. The only thing I have to share with you is the essential to understand what happened some time ago. I am from a small town in Zacatecas. I decided to look for a job as a maid, taking into account that I was very efficient, hardworking, and a fast learner. I started as a servant more, and at once I had learned the maid's trade, the family I worked for, when their daughter got married and trusted me, asked me to go to their home. Once the marriage union was consolidated, life led the couple to leave Zacatecas for business reasons, and we undertook the trip to Queretaro, where together with just a few of us and the butler, we went to live to serve the lords, leaving the rest to live in the house in Zacatecas for when the lord had to return to give continuity to his businesses and mines. Once in Queretaro, it was usual for the lady to stay alone, since the lord's comings and goings to Zacatecas and other nearby places for business keep his fortune and prosperity. But the lady lived only with our company, only going out to mass, and more than that, to whatever was necessary. As time went by, the lady sought refuge in someone else, since she seemed to be happy, and not because of the letter she received, but it was clear that the motive was different, as if she was having an affair with someone else. I knew it, until luck led me to see it for myself. It was with one of the lackeys. I could see it clearly, an embrace, so close and warm as it was someone you love, not to mention that I saw them kissing with such passion that there was no more explanation than the obvious. I knew it was the best to keep it quiet. I knew it was the best to keep quiet, and I didn't tell anyone for fear of losing my job and any retaliation this might bring. I could tell, at least by the expression on the service, that I was the only one who seemed to know. The secret was torturing at me, and something that I simply talked to God, and I had no choice but to share it with the priest in the most intimate secret of confession, to somehow free myself from such a burden. When the Lord arrived, they had a good time for a few days and fought more and more until he started asking if the lady was having an affair, something she clearly denied, and without enough evidence, he only had his presentiment, shouting the truth that he could not corroborate. Until one night, the master left very late and without prior announcement, something a little unusual, but as a maid, that work corresponded to the lackeys, so I assumed they had a dispute and left in a hurry. The strange thing was that as time went by, neither the master nor his letters were arriving, something that made me even more surprised. Something that made me even more amused. For some days I had been seeing one of the lackeys, Eulalio, who was very close to the lady, looking fearful, not to mention that in those days every time we had a day off and went out to enjoy our day off, or to run an errand outside the house, the authorities and even the night watchman could ask us about what was happening with the Lord, to which, according to express instructions of the lady, we would only answer, "The gentleman has decided to spend some more time in Zacatecas and attend to his business outside the city." On more than one occasion, I even heard the lady said that the Lord had gone to Spain or Cuba, something that surprised us. But we decided not to discuss or criticize, just to take it for granted, despite the strangeness of such a request. Suddenly, out of the blue, at night I heard as if someone was digging in the yard. I looked out and saw the lady, dirty, with dirt on her dress and a shovel, something that surprised me, and I decided to keep quiet. The strangest thing is that the next morning Eulalio was no longer there. According to what the lady said, in the middle of the night he had told her he had to leave, and she only managed to give him some money for some problems he had gotten into, and left. Just like that. According to some of the lackeys, they said that Eulalio had left some belongings that he would never forget. So the rumor began to circulate that something had happened to him. I began to fear for my life, and I did everything I could to try to get out. Somehow the rumor began to circulate that the lady had murdered her husband, something that chilled my blood, but in my heart that what I feared was true. Fortunately, I received an answer that a house in Zacatecas needed a maid, so I took advantage of that excuse to return and tell the lady that my family needed me nearby. The lady agreed. But unfortunately, I could not leave for a couple of days. So I decided to stay in an inn so as not to stay in the house, although I don't know if that was the best or the worst thing, since the next morning they found the lady lifeless in the plaza. Someone had murdered her. The authorities, according to what I learned, were making inquiries and believed that she had done something to her husband and Eulalio as well. Although their bodies were never found, she was blamed for her crime, and many said that her death was caused by someone who was avenging them for their deaths and disappearance, and others said that the deceased themselves were the ones who provoked her death. I was able to find peace of mind in Zacatecas after a few days. I met some of my coworkers and they told me that the days following the death of the lady were the worst, since they kept seeing her silhouette from the window and even her reflection in the mirrors or hearing her footsteps, not to mention the terrible chills they felt when they were in the courtyard, especially at night. I suppose you want to know the stories of this castle and how it has not collapsed since then. I remember seeing how it was built when I was young. The construction was left in the hands of a samurai of Nobunaga Oda named Katsutoyo Shibata. Unfortunately, he died and the castle was left in the hands of Aoyama clan, who took charge of finishing the construction. Time passed, but the foundations continued to cause problems, and the people in charge were constantly being called to repair it. However, after consulting with priests, Lord Oda summoned the entire village, as it was of utmost importance to find a volunteer, otherwise a victim would be sought. You may be wondering what they meant by this. It turns out that they gave us just a couple of days for a volunteer to come forward as a sacrifice for the hitobashira, the human pillar that could be sacrificed through a ritual so that its spirit would give the castle enough strength to remain standing and undamaged. An elderly woman whose son worked as a servant on Mr. Oda's estates had trained on his own, but never managed to become a samurai. His mother, Oshizu, was very humble, so that she could barely afford medical care, which led her to lose one of her eyes and become blind without even complaining, accepting her fate with a smile. She spoke to one of Mr. Oda's trusted men and requested an audience with him, in which she volunteered for the hitobashira in exchange for her son becoming a samurai under Mr. Oda's command. Once the pact was sealed, it was agreed that he would receive training after the hitobashira, and once the pact was sealed, it was agreed that he would receive training after the hitobashira, and once the main tower was built, he would become a samurai. This is how it was done, and a few days after it was completed, the foundations stopped shaking. The castle was firm and imposing, and it even gained fame, after which it began to be called Gasungajo, Castle of Mist, and Henajo, Strange Castle. The days passed, and as I learned, Oshizu's son was sent to serve in other territories of the daimyo. Some said that his talent as a samurai was little or non-existent due to the demands of the job, while others said that they simply decided to turn a blind eye and give him a higher position as a servant than as a samurai, or that they simply decided to ignore his pact, or that they simply decided to ignore the pact and not carrying it out. In one way or another, only the gods and those involved know the truth. When spring arrived and they saw that the castle was not suffering any setbacks, they continued to trust each other. However, what a surprise they had when in spring the moat began to flood, something that had never happened before. Despite the repairs and the attention of those in charge of this task, there was no apparent explanation or solution to this. In fact, there was a rumor among a few that you could hear someone crying or moaning inside if you listened very carefully, which led us to believe that it was poor Oshizu, angry and suffering for having broken the pact. Year after year, despite showing no other signs of damage, the castle remained the same. with the moon flooded. Some even said that the samurai and some of the castle servants fervently believed that it was oshizu, sad and angry, who flooded the moat with her tears. Fearing that she would become an onorio and seek revenge beyond flooding the moat with her tears, it was built a small monument in her honor and with a poem written that says, "The rain that falls when the sweet harvesting season arrives is the rain that recalls the tears of sadness of poor oshizu." After this happened, it is said that the moat continued flooding, but less frequently. To this day, the castle still stands, as expected. However, when you approach Oshizu's monument, especially during the rainy season, you can feel her sadness and hear her laments in the moat when it floods. Often suffering you cause comes back to you, and often with a vengeance. In my experience, or rather that of my grandmother and all the residents of this street, one of the oldest in Amsterdam. In addition to its historical significance, this street was the scene of an event that disrupted the peace not only for those involved, but of everyone who lives and has lived on this street. This story dates back to the 18th century, when two sisters and their father, who was a tanner, lived at number 134. The two sisters were very different from each other. Dina was kind-hearted and friendly, while Helena was self-centered and had a strong temper. One day, a handsome young sailor named Wouter arrived and instantly fell in love with Dina. He began to show his appreciation and strong feelings for Dina, and she corresponded it. But the two did not count on something else. Helena had also fallen in love with Wouter. The time came when Wouter set sail and sent her a letter, which arrived just when Dina was not at home, and Helena received it and threw it away. When Wouter returned, he asked her about the letter, which she admitted had not reached her, something that upset him. But after calming him down, they continued to lavish love on each other once again. Dina realized that the only person capable of hiding something like this would be Helena. After a heated argument and taking advantage of the fact that her father was away from home, she confronted her. Here, the story differs. Some say that Helena gagged her and killed her shortly afterwards. Others said that she killed her immediately and hid her in the basement. Whatever the truth may be, Dina cursed Helena before she died, telling her that if she took her life, she would never find peace. Helena initially told those who asked about Dina that she had gone out. Dina was found dead days later, as if it were an accident. Wouter was devastated and at the mercy of Helena, who took advantage of the situation to offer him comfort. After a reasonable amount of time, wouter married Helena. Dina was found dead days later, as if it were an accident. Wouter was devastated and at the mercy of Helena, who took advantage of the situation to offer him comfort. After a reasonable amount of time, Wouter married Helena. They started a family, and on the surface, they seemed to have a happy life. However, inside, she was consumed by guilt and regret for what she has done to her own flesh and blood. When her time came, on July 24th, 1753, already on her deathbed and about to leave this world, she confessed to Wouter what she had done and begged him forgiveness, as only then would she be able to depart in peace. But Wouter, filled with anger, pain, and regret, burned with rage and sadness, cursed her for her actions and said that if peace was within him, he would not give it to her, leaving her in her pain and in her final moments of life. Here comes the interesting part, because that same night, once Helena left this world, she did so with screams and cries coming from the former tannery, waking up Wouter himself and the neighbors. Over time, they said that they hear wails and felt a chilling atmosphere every time it was Helena's death anniversary. However, to the surprise of many, it remained a local legend, and exactly 100 years later, on July 24, 1853, noises, screams, and wails were heard coming from there, something that no one believed, and everyone with no apparent cause for such noise. Frightened, the neighbors told this story from generation to generation, especially those close to the former tannery. According to my grandmother, on July 24, 1953, after a previous incident, neighbors, other curious onlookers, and even reporters gathered to witness and document what happened. However, nothing was heard. It was as if Helena had been intimidated by so much attention and felt intimidated by it. Now, my family has set the bar very high for me, and they hope that I or someone else in the family will live to see July 24, 2053, and be able to witness whether Helena makes an appearance in response to what happened, or if, in the end, she was able to find her way, either to eternal rest or to punishment beyond this plane, and what was once her home. This city hides its own stories. I will tell you about my tragic fate. My name is Cesco Pizzigani, and I was a famous stonemason. I remember carving the facade of the scuola di San Marco in the Castello district, which had to be repaired and even rebuilt to some extent after the terrible fire of 1485. My talent was such that I even worked on other famous buildings in the city. I had my own workshop. People liked my work, and everyone respected and admired me. It was so nice to see that even the students of the Scuola di San Marco said they admired my work, and despite having no opportunity in life other than this trade, my work was heard of even other lands. What would fill me more than working in the quarry was my family and that my workshop continued to have work. Unfortunately, my beloved wife, Florinda, fell ill. I did everything I could to give her proper treatment with a doctor, but unfortunately, she was getting worse. The bills were mounting and I couldn't afford any more. The cost rose so high that I had to sell my workshop. I even stopped working when her condition worsened, so that I could help her and keep her by my side. Unfortunately, God called her to his side, and everything I did didn't work. Now that Florinda, my support, my inspiration, had left this world, I was left not only in sadness and melancholy, but also in misery. I had no money. I sold many of my tools, leaving me with only my chisel. This led me to the Scuola di San Marco, which was also dedicated to helping the needy. They pitied me. I could see it in their eyes, and even thought they at least gave me food. I no longer had a roof over my head, so I ended up going to the pier. To entertain myself with my chisel, I drew the boats on the columns of the moorings, which I could see when they arrived, as my hands found some comfort in doing so. What I was doing now was nothing compared to what I had done in the past, but at least it kept me busy, and my hands wanted to remember what they knew how to do, even if it was in an austere and rustic way. I found some distraction in this place. There were many Levantines living nearby, in Zeedijk, if I remember correctly, but here in Castello, there was someone else, a Venetian woman who had a child with one of them. Her son was already a man, dressed in Levantine attire, but neither of them were married. It was said that he had a wife and found love, and unable to resist the women of these lands, they gave him this son, who, unfortunately for the boy, was not well regarded by either the people of Castello or the Levantines. I always heard that he beat his mother, got angry, and reproached her for why neither side accepted him, and she, humble as her heart reflected, accepted her son's beatings. I couldn't believe it, seeing that poor woman beaten, hiding the bruises from the world, and saying anything to others. I heard whispers that he beat her and even witnessed some of these beatings, which were hard to watch. However, one night I witnessed the worst. From my vantage point, I saw this young man arguing with this mother. I saw this young man arguing with his mother. When he entered, I hear blows and screams, but then the worst happened. It didn't take long for me to see him come out with a heart in his hand. The woman wasn't hurt, so I assumed the worst. He ran towards the bridge next to the Scuola di San Marco, but he tripped and the heart flew out and rolled until it fell into the water. The Levantine cried because as it fell into the water, he heard a voice coming from the heart asking, "Are you okay, my son?" The young man cried, devastated, with the heart already submerged in the water, stood up and ran towards Fundamenta Medicanti. Near Fundamenta Nove, he threw himself into the water, shouting his guilt and regret and asking his mother for forgiveness for what he had done. Shortly afterwards, his lifeless body floated to the surface. The authorities arrived shortly after and asked me what had happened. My hands couldn't stay still, and I carved that terrible scene, which many people heard about and others saw, as an event that we will never forget. Some say that it is fortunate that he did not hurt anyone else, but if I am not to tell you something, now that my life is coming to an end, this is how I feel. And this is not just my delusions or imagination, it is that when I am here alone, especially in the harsh winters, I see the Levantine running around these parts, searching for his mother's heart as if he were looking for the warmth that he did not know how to appreciate in life.